Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being the show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Manifest. A very interesting episode. A lot of interesting things went down, so let's break everything down bit by bit. Obviously, we're picking up with the murder of Kelly, and this kind of got everyone freaked out, because especially Ben, because it's like, okay, if she was murdered because she was on TV, that starts making Grace think like, well, what about you and Cal? You were on TV? Like, maybe this is because obviously there's already those religious people outside, who that religious lady who tried to talk to Cal. So it's kind of like now they're kind of in the spotlight. So Michaela and Ben do some investigating of their own, but then the agent Vance shut them down because the NSA took over the investigation. And so it's interesting things because it's kind of like, because in last week's episode, I threw out the theory of like, oh, maybe someone killed, like, is this some like supernatural force like manifesting itself, killing them? Or is it one of the passengers from the plane itself that killed Kelly? And it turns out not to be the case, because Kelly's whole situation was, it was speak the truth. Because I thought like, oh man, Kelly's just doing this because she's trying to get attention and stuff like that, which I guess maybe to a certain degree she was, because basically she was told to tell her truth, but much like Ben and Michaela, she wasn't 100% sure how to manifest, like what that really meant. Because remember, they initially thought was like set them free was about dogs. It turned out to be about those missing sisters. So it's like, okay, so the message gets a little jumbled. So that was what she thought was supposed to be her thing, but it turns out she changed a lot about herself. Like, she wanted to live simpler life. She wanted to also have a smaller house. So like there's little things here and there about like some of her personality kind of changing. So, and then it turns out the reason behind that is because Ben and Michaela eventually find out, they go to like the mall that she apparently owns, which is interesting. Like when they were chasing after that person, because it's like, oh, what's up with this? Because the person immediately ran. When Ben's going through, you look at the clock, it says 8:28. So I love, probably throughout the entire season, there's always going to be stuff like that. There's always going to be an 8:28 you'll find somewhere. It's kind of a weird comparison to make, but I think it's like the TV show Psych kind of had a similar thing. I don't remember if it was in the entire series, but there was a certain point in the show where like they'd be like, okay, did you spot the pineapple in this episode? So it's one of those type of things where it's probably there's always going to be an 8:28 somewhere, in the episode, at the very least, probably one time, maybe. Well, no, because it pops up multiple times, but I don't know. But that probably still will reign true in some shape or form. Either way, it turns out the Taylors aren't necessarily good people. In particular, Kelly's husband, Patrick, isn't. Like, the mall they own, they basically rent it out to people who are illegals in this country. And like, oh, you pay me or I'm going to call immigration on you, So it kind of threatening people. So it's like, okay, so Patrick killed his wife, huh? Interesting. It's like, nope, Patrick actually did. He's a scummy dude, but none of the evidence actually points to him because he actually has an airtight alibi. Now, all this kind of ties in together with Michaela's thing, which it's just interesting, like the serendipity of it all, like how the connectivity of it all. Because basically, I'm going to skip around here, but basically the whole situation of like her trying to stop Beverly and her swerving her car, I was like, oh, wow, that's I was like, oh. And she's walking to check on the other person. I'm like, oh, is it going to be someone she knows or something? Like, it's going to be, oh, Small World or something. It's like, yeah, because it turns out it's Christine, the housekeeper, because she actually has Kelly's necklace. So it's like, she's actually the killer. And it's like, that all worked out like that. It's like, what? That's crazy. So like, because I like that, because it was a twist you wouldn't even expect. It's like, oh yeah, you stopped the car. It's like, you would have never thought that it'd play out like that. There is reasoning for everything. Everything happens for a reason in all of this. And it's interesting because Christine's reason for doing it, like, this has nothing to do with 8:28, which is interesting. Which kind of goes back to the whole, like, the plane blowing up. Like, was that someone else from the flight getting that to be their calling? Because I was thinking like, oh, maybe killing Kelly was someone's calling. It's like, no, like Kelly's death was an accident. Maybe not. Maybe there's more to this than that, Like, I mean, it seems like it's just circumstances that led to it, because it's just kind of like Christine killed her because it's like, you were dead, you were gone. Patrick was good, I was good. Like, it wasn't like a relationship, but it's like, oh, we needed each other and we made each other better. And she just comes back kind of flaunting her necklace and acting like I'm the servant. Like, it's just kind of like, no. While you were gone, I was helping him. I made him a better person. We're a good team. You can't come here and trying to wreck everything. And it's kind of interesting because it's not the same thing, but you see it in a certain vein with Ben's whole situation with Grace and the family. So it's just kind of an interesting thing, like that it kind of took a negative turn like that. But I guess it's just like Christine would probably always kind of have this obsessive personality, and so probably like when she had the opportunity to like, oh, it's like, no, we built this life of being great together, and you just came in and just ruined it. Like your return sucks. It's like you're dead. You should have stayed dead, type of thing. So it's kind of like, huh. So it's just, it wasn't some grand conspiracy. It was just kind of like, or some supernatural force necessarily. It was just kind of like, no, just greedy, obsessed, not, I guess, just obsessed person, you know. It's just, I don't know. I just thought that was kind of interesting. I was like, wow, completely trashed my theory immediately making it like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And since I was talking about it, I'll go ahead and circle back to it. A big part of this episode is about Mikayla. Like, she's still dealing with the whole Evie's death situation. In fact, like, she couldn't even really get behind a car. And she hadn't really told anyone at work what it's like, aren't you going to have to be driving for your job? But, like, she's like, yeah, but tonight I can't do it. So she got Ben. Hence, her and Ben being in this together. So we probably see that a lot more of him kind of jumping into investigations and stuff like that. Because it's like, like, it's just kind of like, oh, I'll be your partner and everything. So... because it is interesting too, because I think that religious angle is going to be a bigger role as the series progresses, because that was something Ben was like, yeah, everyone's thinking it's these people who did it, but it's like, no, they kind of, in a weird way, worship us. They wouldn't hurt us like that, because you even see the guy... Isaiah, the guy that was originally arrested for her murder, like the fact is he had blood on his clothes and everything. Part of him is like, you tried to save her life, didn't you? It's like, well, to a certain degree, because he was one of those religious people that was outside and probably like he, probably kept watching. It was nearby and heard the gunshot call, so he ran to probably try and save her life. But it's interesting. He ended up saying what he said, and that kind of led Michaela to go to Evie, which led go to Evie's house and run into Evie's dad, and then the whole thing with Beverly, which led to her catching the killer. So it's these little things here and there, because it's interesting, because I don't know whether it's just him or all of them in general. I mean, like, it's like, oh, you're the chosen few. Like, I don't know whether these are just people who are lost, who found something to latch onto, because he's like, oh no, like, I've been to prison before, but once I've served my penance, and when I'm going, I'll come back and I'll be pure. And it's just kind of like, that's interesting. Like I said, he said some words that kind of like sat with Michaela, being like, hey, like, the fact of the matter is there are some truths that you're kind of hiding from yourself, because the whole emphasis of this episode is like, own your truth, so it's kind of interesting. You kind of find out the whole situation behind the whole Evie and Michaela thing. Like, I guess it was kind of a situation, she was a little buzzed, but she wasn't like, over the legal limit. The thing is, like, Evie was like, no, I need my car. So she was going to drive her car anyway. Michaela decided, like, no, fine, I'll do it. And I think that's even more reason why she feels even more guilty, because it's like, if I had just been like, no, we're going to do this, if I'd been steadfast, maybe things wouldn't have played out the way they did, so that was her friend too. So obviously, because also, like, Evie's parents blamed her too. Sadly, it's in that situation of Beverly's kind of in her situation, might be like a dementia or Alzheimer's situation, but her memory's kind of going. So her husband kind of stopped telling her the truth about Evie, because it's like he would have to re-burden her with that sad truth every 15 minutes, and he just couldn't do that to the woman he loved, so that's that terrible situation, so I think finally confronting it and kind of facing it, knowing the situation, like, okay, I gotta help out Beverly, like, kind of got her through that hump. So I thought that was kind of pretty interesting. Some other things that went down this episode is kind of circling back to Ben and the family. Kind of got him kind of a little worried. He runs into Kevin, who was like Cal's best friend. Is like, now he's a teenager and everything. Turns out he's dating Olive, which kind of pisses Cal off, because it's just more aspects of his life completely changing. Olive is making him promise, like, hey, our twin thing of like not ratting, like, this would be our secret, because she was sneaking out, but he ratted her out because he was, like I said, he was mad, because it's like, for one, it's like someone that was like my best friend is now like way older than me, plus you're dating him, and it's just this whole weird thing, because he's even like, how are we twins? It's like, oh, we're not supposed to break promises because we're twins, right? But how are we twins when I look the way I do? It's just out of place and everything, like still being small, and now you have like his sister being older than him, and it's like, are we really twins? But she assures him, it's like, no matter what, because it's like, I was your best friend and I still am. The fact of the matter is, like, it's always going to be us versus the world, twins rule. So I thought that was kind of like a little nice tie together of like, yeah, it's still adjustment for everybody. Ben struggling with the whole like, oh yeah, there's all these different men in Grace's life. One was Lindsay. He was kind of, I think he's like a coach for Olive, or at least like they're different people. Like Lindsay was the guy. He was coming in to like bring Olive's shin guards or whatever to her because she left them. And it's like, you know, it kind of makes Ben feel, because it's like, who are all these men in your life? And Grace is like, they were all here. They were support for me when things, you know, was hard. Like, you know, you were gone and it was hard for me to handle. So all these people, yeah, they're support people, but they're not the person you're really asking about. We find his name this episode, and it's Danny. And she's like, no matter what, the fact of the matter is you don't know him. You never will know him because you are back, you are home. And she talks about later on, like, how the fact is that she loves Ben, and she always has. She never stopped loving him in those 5 years. And it's interesting because our friend at work or whatever, Rob, had talked about the fact is, like, I'm very protective of Danny, but it almost feels like you're cheating on him. And even she admits, yeah, I feel like that too. Because I don't think she's really, I think she might be afraid to kind of own her own truth. I don't know. Maybe she legitimately, there is truth to what she said, but I think there's probably is some truth to the fact that she might love Danny too. Like, I love that being a thing. So I'm curious, like, that's going to circle back into the story in some shape or form. It might be something Ben ends up having to do is going to circle him back to that. We'll see in the end. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where that kind of ends up playing out. Then there's the whole Agent Vance situation himself, because he goes to Jarrett because he's trying to get Jarrett to spy on Mikayla. It's like, I need to know what she's up to. The fact of the matter is, because Jarrett looked into the whole NSA situation, like what they really gathered in their investigation, and he's like sticking your neck out like that. The fact of the matter is, keep your job, because like, you don't want to be on my bad side, which is like kind of crazy. You're kind of being a dick about this. Yeah, I get the circumstances, but it's like you're kind of being an asshole about it. You being an asshole isn't really going to gain trust with people, because I was expecting him to kind of spin it to be like, well, look at Michaela, she might be in trouble, look at all this stuff that's happening. Eventually he might try and spin that, but I was worried, like, because Jarrett was like trying to talk to Michaela about, Michaela's like, hey, like, you just got to trust me. Some stuff is going down. Because he's like, all the coincidences, first the kids, now this whole situation with figuring out this murder like that. Like, it's a little coincidental that you just happened to find a killer because you were trying to do this whole Beverly situation. So even he kind of like, okay, this is too much to just be simply a coincidence. But she's like, give me time to figure this out. And she's also like, the less you know, the better. But like, he was looking at the card, I was like, is he going to call him? I was like, nope, he rips it up. It doesn't mean Vance is done with him though. Like, that doesn't mean he won't circle back in some shape or form. So we'll kind of have to wait and see in that regard. We also find out, like, throughout the episode, Sanvi was examining everyone's DNA. And, well, because it turns out there's a marker inside of Cal's system that wasn't there, and it's not caused by anything else. So it had to be something related to the flight. And she finds out that, oh, she has it too. And it's potential that all of them have it. I forgot what was it, like ischemic or something? A stroke? It's like the condition, like the particular marker to get like that specific thing. It's a combination of many things that can only be connected to this like a stroke. So it's kind of like, wait, so we all had a stroke? Because I was thinking like, oh, at first I was like, oh, this must be something that makes Cal super special. But it's like, no, it's something that makes all of them special. So I was like, is this supposed to be like what makes them have this connectivity that they did? Not necessarily. It turns out like, essentially that stroke would come about if someone was near death. So I'm guessing it's like they were on the verge, or at least in a state of death, but kind of brought back. So maybe that's where they were for the past 5 years. Whatever like crazy storm they were in trapped them in a state between life and death. Like kind of kept them almost like froze it in a state of death. And maybe this has something to do with the afterlife. And maybe that's how they know what they know, how they have this connectivity. Like I said, it's kind of interesting too, because when you kind of bring that all together, the fact is that Kelly died. It's like she obviously had some important role in all of this, but I guess like she did what she needed to do. Once again, it's like we don't know whether like once someone's done what they needed to do, like it seems like this is about their personal lives, but also the grand scheme of things. Like it seems like it kind of like ventures out, like there's ripples to this. Maybe kind of it starts inward, well, like fixing your like whatever family personal situation you're dealing with, and then rippling out to like grander and bigger things potentially. I don't know. I mean, it kind of coincided for Ben and Michaela, because it's like, in actuality, like, it started kind of like with their family stuff, and then kind of like while at the same time dealing with like the missing girl situation. So now Michaela kind of literally did the same thing too, because her personal stuff was balanced with the whole like, oh yeah, solving Kelly's murder, because it's also like maybe Kelly's murder needed to be found out, because it was also like, yeah, like this is one of the chess pieces. Whatever happened to them happened. Like one of the chess pieces has now been removed from the board, and now does that mean someone else is going to take over what Kelly was going to do, or will we not see that kind of circle back around? Did she do what she was needed to do to a certain extent because she exposed her husband for all the terrible stuff he was doing, extorting and blackmailing people like that, and forcing them kind of into labor situations like that? That's the big question kind of going forward with a lot of this. So we'll just kind of have to ultimately wait and see. Like I said, remember, we only focus on like the specific 20 people that showed up before the plane exploded. So there's that. There's also the twist that the NSA took Kelly's body because they wiped away any records that proved that Kelly was gone, because Sanvi needed some tissue samples to try and figure out, okay, like what's going on. But so the NSA, obviously they're doing some investigating of their own, trying to figure this all out, obviously trying to keep an eye on everyone, because it's like, yeah, you guys in particular kind of find yourselves neck deep in all of this. But what's also interesting is like, is there someone higher up in the government that has a better idea about what's going on here? Like, it just seemed like Agent Vance is legitimately trying to just do his job, trying to figure this out, because it's crazy circumstances, and it's just like, what is this? Like, everyone's trying to understand. So that's what that's about. But it also shows them like that, like the NSA is investigating this heavily, so we do have to be careful before we end up being science projects as well. So like I said, a lot went down in this episode, and I'm so interested to see what this all means going forward with that. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.